What if I told you the president of the United States actually hasn't been running the country? What if every executive order, every bill signed into law, every presidential pardon was all a lie? Now, this isn't a conspiracy theory when it comes to our old president, Joe Biden, and I mean our previous president. We know he's old. Legal experts just testified under oath about evidence so explosive it makes the Watergate scandal look like jaywalking. Now, we're talking about the systematic hijacking of presidential power by unelected bureaucrats, cabinet members literally avoiding the Oval Office just so they don't have to acknowledge the elephant in the living room, which is that our last president was completely and utterly demented. Documents signed without the president's knowledge, a constitutional crisis hidden in plain sight while the media looked the other way. The testimony you are about to see will shake your faith in everything you thought you knew about our government. But first, gold has always been the go-to safe haven during inflation and global uncertainty. And right now, prices are soaring to all-time highs. That's why smart investors are looking at Opawica Explorations Incorporated, trading on the U.S. market under the ticker OPWEF. Opawica is a gold exploration company operating in the legendary Abitibi gold belt of Quebec, one of the richest gold-producing regions in the world, responsible for over 190 million ounces of gold from more than 120 mines. Their flagship properties, Bazooka and Arrowhead, are surrounded by multi-billion-dollar players like Yamana Gold, and they've just kicked off a massive 20,000-meter drill program across these primo sites. And who's backing them? Legendary gold investor Eric Sprott, who invested $1 million of his own money, a clear validation from one of the most trusted names in the business. With strong infrastructure, proximity to proven mines, and leadership from CEO Blake Morgan, a third-generation miner, Opawica is strategically positioned for discovery. Shares are currently trading at around 11 cents, but with exploration underway, the upside could be absolutely explosive. Now, visit opawica.com to see their latest presentation. That's OPAWICA.com. That's opawica.com. Now, the testimony that just dropped on Capitol Hill should terrify every American who believes in constitutional government. We're not talking about political games. We're talking about the complete usurpation of presidential power. Theodore Wold, a constitutional expert, just laid out evidence that will make your blood run cold. Listen to his opening statement about how unelected bureaucrats may have literally stolen our last presidency. Take a look.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning about how the cover-up of President Biden's mental decline endangered America's national security and undermined the Constitution. The U.S. Constitution vests executive power in a single person, the president. At the founding, the president exercised the executive power through only a small group of trusted advisors and personnel. In fact, President Washington had a 4-member cabinet. Today, the president directs a Leviathan executive branch with 15 cabinet departments and at least 4 million full-time executive branch employees. The executive branch proliferation has a single source of democratic legitimacy, that by order of U.S. Constitution's Article 2, the president is both elected by the American people and vested with the executive power, all of it. Traditionally, the president takes positive actions and authenticates those actions through his signature. His signature is required for the most significant actions he may undertake: to sign an executive order, to take any action invested in him by the Constitution, as in granting a pardon, and to take the most important action of all, to sign a bill into law. In all these cases, the president's signature is itself the protection of democratic principle. When the president signs, he communicates his assent and endorsement of the action he takes.
Yeah, the president's signature itself is the protection of the democratic principle. When that signature becomes a rubber stamp in the hands of White House staffers, the republic is basically dead. We're looking at an empty suit. No, here's what they don't want you to understand. The autopen, a device that mechanically reproduces the president's signature, can legally be used. but only when the president personally directs it, only when he makes the decision. But what happens if when a cognitively impaired man for president, what happens when he can't make those decisions? Democrats tried to dismiss this with legal technicalities. Watch Wold destroy their defense. Take a look.
A number of your colleagues on the Democrat side have said, well, there's an OLC opinion here. We don't need to talk anymore. There's an OLC opinion. It says you can use the autopen. The opening paragraph of that OLC opinion says you can use the autopen, but only when the president directs that you do so under his decision-making power, right? It is very clear again and again that the president actually has to make the decision. That cannot be delegated to a staffer or an advisor. And there's no indication here that anyone other than staff were making these decisions.
The president actually has to make the decision. That's why he was ostensibly elected president, okay? This cannot be delegated to staffers or advisors. Yet there's no indication that Biden made any of these decisions at all. And this goes deeper than signatures. Now think about what we're witnessing. We're witnessing a manifestation of narcissistic entitlement at the highest levels of government. Staffers who believed their feelings and ideology superseded constitutional law. They didn't just bend the rules. They shattered the fundamental compact between the people and their elected leader. Senator Josh Hawley understands the gravity of the situation. Watch him demand the documents that will prove this conspiracy. Take a look.
In the policy paper flow to the Oval Office, there should be a record of what documents are presented to the president when and when he gave his assent to the actions that are listed in those documents, whether it's a judicial nomination or it's a statutory response to Congress.
Well, I think the answer is we need to get those documents. And I just say to our friends in the media over here, you guys need to be asking for those documents, and we need to be asking for them, Mr. Chairman. We need to see those documents.
I'm just sitting here imagining Joe Biden wandering around the White House with a little string attached to his arm, like Weekend at Bernie's, like with the sunglasses, and he's like, we need to see those documents. The paper trail exists. The question is whether anyone has the courage to expose it. But here's where it gets truly terrifying. Senator Ted Cruz, one of my favorite senators of all time, asked the question that should chill every American to the bone. This is some really good stuff. Take a look.
Mr. Wold, let me ask you as a legal matter, if there's a law that's passed both houses of Congress and it goes to the White House, and a staffer autopens signing that law without the president's authorization, is that law legally passed and signed into law?
No.
If an executive order is issued and a staffer autopens it without the president's authorization, is that executive order legally binding?
No.
And if a pardon is issued from the President of the United States and a staffer autopens it without the president's authorization, is that pardon legally binding?
No.
This is peak Ted Cruz right here. He absolutely is a master at getting to the bottom of the issue right here. And this is the bottom of the issue. Was anything done during the Biden administration? Can we even consider it to be laws? Laws, executive orders, the pardons, all potentially illegal, all potentially null and void. 4 years of governance that might not even truly legally exist. The pattern of deception runs deep in Democrat history. And this isn't their first rodeo with hiding a presidential incapacity. Take a look at this.
Look, I mean, if you go back through our history, Senator, so Grover Cleveland, Wilson, FDR, JFK, President Johnson, President Biden, it's almost a Democrat sport to keep from the American people the health and acuity of the chief executive. They've been doing this for a long time. But this is of another level, especially as Mr. Spicer was mentioning, the complicity of the national media in obscuring this, but also that cabinet officers would go to the lengths of avoiding interacting with the chief executive because they were fearful that they would have to speak to his diminished capacity.
This should make everyone extremely mad. But I mean, are we really surprised? I don't think this should make anybody surprised. What we're witnessing here is the political expression of the cluster B, emotional, erratic, the the cluster B pathology, where mental, emotional, and psychological dysfunction become institutional policy. We're talking laws that we all have to live by here. The cabinet members who avoided Biden didn't just fail at their duty, they exhibited the classic cluster B trait, the narcissistic trait of avoiding reality that challenges their constructed narrative. Watch this extremely damning revelation about cabinet members literally hiding from their constitutional obligations. Take a look.
I will say the 25th Amendment, it's a modern contrivance, but it still is consistent with American constitutional tradition, which it assumes that officers of the United States will act virtuously and morally. And the idea that members of the cabinet would go to the length of avoiding the Oval Office so as to abdicate their responsibility to verify the appropriateness of the president's acuity or the ability to authenticate actions taken by the president. If that's not a constitutional scandal, I mean, honestly, I don't know what would constitute such.
They knew. They all knew. And they chose to cling to the ring of power over any sort of principle, especially the principles that govern this country, the principles embedded in our Constitution. Now, Senator Eric Schmidt connected all the dots in a speech that should be required viewing for every single American. Take a look at this next one.
In the realm of culture, the regime censored free speech, closed down churches, targeted traditional Catholics and parents at school board meetings, and let an unelected class of left-wing radicals degrade, attack, and lie about our history and our heritage. A poisonous anti-Western, anti-American ideology that had once been confined to elite university classrooms suddenly became the official White House policy. All of this was done not in isolation. It was sustained, defended, and covered for by an alliance of elite institutions, from the media to the so-called expert class to big tech to the federal bureaucracy itself. When we speak of collusion among elites, or the so-called deep state, we're accused of being conspiracy theorists. But this was no theory. It was plain and overt, out in the open for everyone to see. For 4 years, we had a president who could barely string together coherent sentences after 6 p.m. Yet, this glaring fact went unreported.
This isn't just deep state theory. You know, they want you to stand in disbelief of your lying eyes. I mean, we all could see the president, you know, and this monumental effort to keep this a secret, the secret that we all knew, the secret that was out in the open. You know, this is classic narcissistic personality disorder, but institutionalized on the grandest scale that you can think. The grandiosity that you have to believe that you can run a presidency without a president, it's amazing. It's staggering. You know, the entitlement to think that constitutional law simply doesn't apply to you. You know, the lack of empathy for the American citizen, the American people, the people that you are deceiving. You know, they created a Potemkin presidency, a facade maintained by bureaucrats who believe their ideology mattered more than our votes. That's abuse. Every policy, every decision, every action taken in Biden's name is potentially fraudulent, and each and every last one of them needs to be looked into. This autopen scandal isn't just about mechanical signatures. We're not talking about formalities here. This is about mechanical governments by an emotionally and psychologically dysfunctional elite who turned the White House into their personal playground while a confused old man wandered the halls. But pardon me, I don't want to speak ill of the dead. If you got value from this report, please tap subscribe. You know, this is bigger than Biden. This is about a ruling class so consumed by narcissistic entitlement that they believed they could fake a presidency and that we would never notice. They wanted to pull the wool over our eyes. And they treated the Constitution like toilet paper and democracy like it's a suggestion. For 4 years, America had no legitimate president, just puppeteers pulling strings while the media played along and just completely went along with it. Now, here's a controversial question. Should every Biden official who knew about his incapacity and said nothing be prosecuted for treason? Yes or no? Light up the comment section. You know, the autopen scandal proves what we've always suspected. The deep state isn't hiding anymore. They're bragging, the braggadocio. They turn mental dysfunction into standard operating procedure, emotional instability into policy, and constitutional fraud into an agenda. You want to fight back? Support real journalism. Grab your next news gear from our description. Check out the our President Autopen t-shirt. Every purchase funds the investigation they desperately want stopped. The truth is out. The question is, what are we going to do about it?